Okay, let's review the 2025 Rugby League Ashes series at last. Now, obviously, Australia on the series 3-0. That was expected. That was expected. The coaching side of things, I think we can criticise both coaches for some of the use of their squads. Look, Kevin Walters is a little bit hamstrung in regards to squad selection because of the rise of Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, PNG. New Zealand have always had a strong side, but there are some of the Kiwi players who were selected have been selected in recent years who've also been eligible for Australia. And now, obviously, England, AJ Brimson this year, and of course, if Victor Radley had not been a Wally in earlier in the year with that golf trip and what's happening with Brandon Smith and those text messages and the aftermath of that, he would have got selected. So, again, players eligible for Australia, playing for other nations. I think that's hamstrung Kevin Walters a little bit. So it wasn't the strongest potential Australian side we've seen. Obviously, Luai and Payne Haas, for example, bigger missions. Enough to get the job done. And that's really the concern for me as an England fan is that was one of the weaker Australian sides we've seen. They didn't have to play at the best that we've seen either. Apart from the second test, which I thought was reasonably close in regards of a physical battle and England making it scrappy and keeping the scoreline close. If you look at it, England only scored 2 tries. They didn't score a try in the second test. And a lot of that, you have to look at Sean Wayne. You've also got to look at quality of Super League and player development and other issues. And we've discussed that to death in regards to the Super League's issues and growing the game at grassroots and getting the game played in schools, colleges and universities outside of the M62 corridor. So if you know your geography, it's that period, that bit of England between Hull and the Yorkshire coast and going up to Cumbria, basically. It's sort of like a banana shape with a bit of Cheshire, Greater Manchester, huge chunk of Yorkshire, huge chunk of Lancashire, a bit of Cumbria. You can sort of draw like a boomerang shape in the north of England. Growing the game outside those areas, I think, hasn't been happening, in my opinion. And the RFL have got their growth strategy all wrong. The Super League structure with the IMG grading and all the hoo-ha around that and the TV deal, there's a lot of issues, basically. And I think it is actually having an impact on the quality of play at the highest level here in the Super League in Europe. And the same can be said for France as well. They were meant to host the upcoming World Cup, which is now being played next year right now. They ended up pulling out because of funding issues. France has got problems as well. So England and France, things aren't going particularly well in areas of the game and administration side of things. But on a coaching side of things, I'm one of the people who don't think Sean Wayne should have stayed on as England coach past, in recent years. But we've had no announcement from the RFL in regards to a review of this series. Kevin Walters' future will be more interesting. I think that we will see if he gets the job full time for next year's World Cup, and I think an announcement will come as the off-season draws to a close. I think maybe before or just after the Vegas weekend, I think we might get an announcement in regards to Kevin Walters' future, a more structural bang. This is going to be our plan for the World Cup. The Sean Wayne situation, who do you replace him with? And I could list off a whole number of coaches, past and present, who involved with the England setup and coaching right now and available right now. There's a whole host of players, ex-players who are currently coaches that we could look at, for example. Now, people are saying Sam Burgess should be replacing him. I don't think he's got enough coaching experience myself. Return Wayne Bennett to the role. Some are saying that. We can't, others. And look, the way England played wasn't good enough. Simple. But we shall see what the RFL do in regards to the head coach position. But there's got to be a much deeper inquest into what's happened since 2017 and the decline of England as a rugby league international team. The sport's brilliant. I love the sport. As a southerner, with northern roots, mind, but as a southerner, I'm not meant to like rugby league, according to some gatekeeper fans. But the London Broncos have a decent little fan base. It's small, I get that. And I'm a London Broncos fan, and I always have been. But according to many, rugby league fans in the south of England don't exist. We don't exist. And the RFL have neglected to grow the game in the Midlands and the South for too long. And people take the piss out of London Broncos, and such. But hey, there are teams in the North that draw less than the Broncos do. There are teams right now about to go bust. So make of that what you will. Now, moving on from that little chip on my shoulder, I will say that that pisses me off when some on social media say there's no fans of rugby league outside the traditional heartlands. There are. We do exist. We are people. We're not a figment of your imagination, and we clearly are living in your heads rent free. Now, use of stadiums. Wembley for me does not work as a rugby league venue anymore. It hasn't for a good decade, but that's again a personal opinion of mine. I've done videos looking at attendance issues that Wembley's had. If you are to have a test match in London, the Emirates is a much better location. Tottenham's new stadium, the rebuilt White Hart Lane, West Ham with the London Olympic Stadium. Yes, they are smaller venues, but you're more likely to sell them out completely, no empty seats. Now, yes, Wembley, 64,000. That's, a good crowd for any rugby league match. But in Wembley, with that many empty seats, including half the upper tier completely empty, it looks crap on TV. You cannot hide it. And when you're trying to, at a time when the game is at a crossroads, the sport's at a crossroads, yes, it's doing great in Australia and New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. Absolute. Growth's been fantastic. The player production line is a thing. But here, when you're trying to get domestic and foreign investment and a media rights deal negotiated and get sponsors on board and new fans, empty seats looks really bad. Really bad. Now, yes, look, not going to lie, a couple of my friends took their young son to his first ever, match. He's only about 3-4 years old. Took his young son. They were right up in the nosebleeds, and they've obviously put the photos on Facebook. The empty seats, very obvious. Even from that high angle looking down at the lower bowls, you can see empty seats. It does not help when the two teams playing. One plays in white, mostly white. One plays in mostly green. The seats are red. They're going to stand out like a sore thumb. So for me, the Emirates works better. The rebuilt White Hart Lane, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium works better. They're closer to central London. As a sports fan, if you were going to go and actually go, this is like my big event of the year. I'm saving up. I'm going to go. You can make a weekend of it. You can go do some touristy things in London or some touristy things around outside in the southeast, because there's some great places to go in this part of the country, and then be there for game day. You can use like a town or another city around London, because there are other towns and cities in the southeast. Yes, there are cities in the southeast as your base of operations, and then have that. Wembley is, as an area in the council area of Brent, is not a particularly nice area. I've been there. It's not pleasant. Whereas the Emirates, ironically, you're not too far from King's Cross. White Hart Lane, I don't think you're too far from, is it Euston? One of the other major mainline stations? I can't remember if it's further east or further west, but you're in that part of north central London. You're near Camden, that kind of. There's a lot of things to do. The new Everton Stadium, the Hill Dickinson Stadium as it is now officially known, Bramley Moor Dock Stadium as it was known during development phase, fans raving about the stadium, loved it. Getting to and from the stadium was the main complaint. There were some teething issues. The pitch markings weren't great, they weren't particularly visible, but there had been a lot of rain before kick-off. You have to remember that. We've had some bands of bad weather coming through. Teething issues with the Hill Dickinson, but fans loved the experience in the ground. I loved the pre-match entertainment, the half-time entertainment, the sound system, all that kind of stuff. Concessions, they loved it. It was getting to and from central Liverpool and the hub of the city to Bramley Moor Dock. Now, I'm not an expert on the Merseyrail network or anything like that. I am a little bit of a transport nerd, but I'm not an expert on public transportation in Liverpool in regards to the bus routes and the Merseyrail network and the other national rail network as well. But apparently, not the best connected. Again, teething issues, and that's something for the City Council in Liverpool to work out in time. There's a lot of development going on in the area, or planned development soon to be in the area surrounding the stadium. And so in years to come, I wouldn't be surprised if the RFL and whatever touring nation comes up to the Northern Hemisphere to play tests, for example, be it Tonga, Samoa, New Zealand, Australia again, PNG, whatever nation it may be, or a future World Cup, that stadium is used as a future venue. It worked really well. It was just getting fans to and from central Liverpool to the stadium, or other areas in Merseyside to the stadium. who decided to use public transport. Those who obviously decided to just go in the car and drive, or in a minibus and drive, again, parking was a bit of a nightmare apparently, again, in regards to the stadium. But I think teething issues, I think the area will improve in time. Finally, Headingley as a stadium. Look, it works well as a Super League stadium, as a club stadium for the Leeds Rhinos. Absolutely, it's had a lot of investment in the sports complex because you've also got the cricket stadium next door. That's part of the same complex. So a lot of money's been spent on both. Leeds is a rugby league mad city. It's a sports mad city. Much like Liverpool, much like London, sports fans everywhere. It's a thriving city. It's the UK's second area when it comes to the financial industry. There are a lot of people with disposable income in Leeds by northern standards and by UK standards as a wider metro area. But the size of the stadium for me was the wrong stadium to use for this Test series. I understand the nostalgia aspect and using a current rugby league ground and a Super League ground and the history that Leeds Rhinos have in the game and their importance to the sport. But I would have gone with St James's Park in Newcastle. It's a bigger stadium. It's a non-traditional market. It does well for Magic Round in the past, although Magic Round's obviously future of Magic Round's up in the air, and in recent years it's been Ellen Road's been used. But the locals in Newcastle and in Tyne Wear in general used to love it when Magic Round used to be taken there. Locals would buy tickets to watch games. There's a lot to do in central Newcastle. Not saying there's not a lot to do in the Headingley area of Leeds, mind, but there's a lot to do in the centre of Newcastle. Lots of restaurants, pubs, clubs, bars, things to do tourist-wise, museums, things to do. Very similar to taking a game to London, to the Emirates, for example. You're right in the city centre, good transport links. Not knocking Headingley in that area of Leeds, but St James's Park is the city centre. You are literally there. You're on top of all the amenities. And I think that was one thing that the Bramley Moore Hill Dickinson Stadium in Liverpool was a little bit knocked for, was it wasn't right on top of the amenities and was difficult to get to by public transport, whereas St James's Park you don't need public transport because it's the city centre and Newcastle Central train station is literally there. It works well, the locals buy in, and looking at the other two stadiums used, non-traditional rugby league markets, and I think that's something that the RFL should be very keen on is growing the game in the non-traditional markets. And I've been saying this is I think is impacting player development and the player pool, is we're not reaching youngsters across the country, we're not reaching communities across the country. And as a rugby league fan here in the south of the UK, outside of Greater London and parts of the Midlands, Greater London's actually got its own amateur league. It does. I've researched it, I've looked at it, I think there's about 8 to 10 teams involved. You've got the London Scholars that have now dropped down to amateur status, you've got the London Broncos, and the London Scholars used to be obviously in League One and the Championship at various points. So the game is played in these locations. It needs to be better supported, the growth needs to be there. Obviously we know about the traditional heartlands, but you are limiting your player and fan base by sticking to these particular locations. I would, again, taking a game to Newcastle would have worked. It would have worked because Geordies are very passionate about their community, Tyne and Wear in general, and they're pretty welcoming people, to be honest. I've got a lot of Geordie friends, and they're very proud of their city, and they would have turned up to St James's Park. It is a fantastic stadium, let's not kid ourselves. Finally, I want to end on broadcasting. I would have much rather had the availability of the Fox feed, to be honest. While I appreciate the BBC made it free to air, and that was part of this agreement to get this series on, was it had to be a free to air series. Years past, when Great Britain Lions existed, Sky Sports put a paywall in the way. So I'm really glad it was on free to air. But the pre and post match analysis, half-time analysis, and the commentary, I prefer the Fox commentary, the Fox feed commentary. It would have been nice to have Andrew Voss come over and do some commentary. It really would, or Dan Janane. I'm just picking out a couple of commentators that I actually like as commentators. Look, James Graham, as an ex-player and now as a media personality, I think he did a fantastic job. I will give James Graham a thumbs up. I think, while I don't agree with all his opinions, I think he did quite well. Having Sam Burgess as one of the the match day pundits. Okay, he's currently a head coach. I think that is a good move. He's a young head coach. I think that is a good move. But I'm going to leave a big but here. How is Jonathan Davis still commentating for the BBC? Both in rugby union and rugby league. Yeah. Again, hence why I prefer the Fox commentary teams they have. Give me Andrew Voss over Jonathan Davis any day of the week. And yeah, Andrew Voss, people, he has his detractors and his critics, and I understand that, and I accept that. But the commentary left a lot to be desired. It helps if you could pronounce player names and do your research. Years past, doesn't matter what sport we're talking about, commentators would do their research on how to pronounce player names, a full bio on the player, how many games they played last season, when they actually debuted, how many injuries they've had, how long they were out injured. Was it 6 months? Was it 3 months? Mark Nwanga Nitawase is actually not that hard to pronounce. In commentary, they went, oh, Marky Mark. They just used his nickname, which I actually found a bit cringe. And I've also noticed that in commentary, look, rugby league fans don't need talking down to like school children. The majority of people probably watching have watched rugby league before. The commentary, they were talking down to the audience rather than talking to the audience. So I've been very critical of BBC commentary on a lot of sports for some time, and ITV and Channel 4 and Channel 5. It doesn't matter what the free-to-air broadcaster is in the UK. I think the quality of punditry and commentary has gone down the toilet in the last decade. I will say this: James Graham, I'll give him a thumbs up. He does commentary for Triple M over in Australia. Obviously he's come over to do a little bit of commentary for the BBC on a short-term basis. He did a bit of punditry as well. He did quite well. Sam Burgess, I will say this, did quite well, but overall, not. I mean, look, Mark Chapman, I think, does a decent job as a sports presenter. He does a decent job. He's a knowledgeable bloke. He covers a lot of sports. He is a northerner. He is a rugby league fan. I think that does help, but I don't think he's helped by the supporting cast. And you've got to, and Tanya Arnold as well. She does get some criticism. They do their best, but then you've got to get the pieces around. And some of the ex-players and ex-coaches I don't think they're necessarily the best. Not knocking them, they're still doing it, they're still trying, but I do think the commentary, well, I wouldn't say dumbed down, but they talk down to the audience rather than talk to the audience. The audience is educated. Now, Jonathan Davis, my criticism of him is, well, I've got Welsh friends. I can understand a Welsh accent pretty well. But he cannot pronounce players' names correctly, even with a Welsh accent. And that is, you've really got to be some kind of level of an idiot not to do your research. He's been commentating now since the early 2000s. He's been doing it for over 25 years. He was crap then. He is crap now. And that is me being honest. Getting Keir, the former Sheffield Eagles coach in, again, he's decent. He's getting old now, but he's a decent bit of knowledge. But again, maybe getting Sam Burgess in there rather than just a pundit, giving a little bit of commentary time. Maybe he's younger. He's more in touch with the modern game. Maybe. But I just don't know. I mean, the first test we didn't have Jonathan Davis, and it was actually the best commentator of the 3 tests over here. Just, again, personal viewpoint. But I would have much rather had the ability to watch on the NRL website and watch the Australian Fox feed. Honestly, that's my personal opinion. I prefer the Australian commentary. Andrew Voss, yeah, he has his critics, but he makes the commentary kind of fun. And he can pronounce player names. Jonathan Davis can't, and he's just not a good commentator. He's been commentating for most of my life, a quarter of a decade, and he still can't basic research, just basic research on how to pronounce a player's name and what a player has done throughout their career. When I was a kid growing up, it doesn't matter what the sport was, the commentators would have done their research, would pronounce the athlete's name correctly, and would have a full bio on them. Full bio of date of birth, birthday, favourite food, all the way down to every single match they've played and their everything. Now they're just lazy. They're just, the research isn't there, the quality isn't there, and they dumb it down, and it's just treating the audience as if we're thick, which I didn't like. But there we go. There's my review of the Ashes. Australia deserved to win. They were the better side, which does speak to the issues within, obviously, the within the game. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.